are you concerned that this could be the trigger of something much bigger? We've seen it in the Arab world where it starts small, the flare then becomes bigger and bigger, and suddenly it's uncontrollable.
Well, I like to put things in their proper perspective. First of all, there is a great deal of misunderstanding of what so-called dynamic zero policy is all about. It's not to achieve absolute zero in all circumstances, in all places, at all times. It's only to ensure that there is the earliest possible detection, the earliest possible containment, the earliest possible prevention, and the earliest possible cure. The idea is not to achieve absolute zero number in all circumstances. And having said that, as recently as January 2022, at the beginning of this year, according to a world-renowned research company called Edelman Trust Barometer, based in New York, EDELMAN, you can Google that. According to their the survey in January 2022, surveying countries around the world and how people view the government's ability and also performance in response to the pandemic, China came up on top, supported by the vast majority of its people because of its ability to reduce the death numbers to the bare minimum. I mean, for example, in the United States, we just suffer over 1 million deaths, and China's 4 times the population, and a much less advanced medical system. So you got to compare like with like. And even in now, with the surge of the new variant, in Japan, for example, daily additional cases number something like 60,000, compared with only 30,000 in China, in spite of the fact that China's got 12 times more population compared with Japan, and of course, as I said, a much less advanced medical coverage, and with a lot of vulnerable groups. So having said that, though, I think that after 3 years, patience is beginning to wear thin. And of course, the young people in various universities, they're now taking to the streets, and they seem to be spreading across the country. And then not only are they protesting against the lockdown, there are provocative slogans and also displaying white paper as a sign of protest, and banners and so on and so forth, and even calling the government to step down, and even President Xi himself. So I think that this is a worrying trend, and because they are reminiscent of what appear to be color revolutions elsewhere. In fact,
do you think it could become that? That's the question I'm asking you. All these revolutions that we saw in the Arab world, which started out with matters not directly political, but became about something political, consumed the ruler of the day, at least from the outside, it seems there has been a build-up for some time. Is this literally where that outburst comes out into full public view?
No, I think that these kind of protests have a tendency to morph into something else. Speaking from Hong Kong, which I experienced the various protests before, I mean, they started off with something quite mundane, and then eventually evolved. And that's also what happened in the so-called color revolutions elsewhere. So I think the Beijing is likely to address this very seriously. But having said that, even a couple of months ago, Beijing has already introduced a special, more flexible mandate to the various provinces and cities, because not all cities are alike. Most of the Chinese population are concentrated in the big cities and in the coastal areas, and then a lot of vulnerable groups, the elderly. The vaccination rate is extremely low, something like only 40%. So I think that there is more flexibility given to the various provinces, and I think with the development of the pandemic becoming like an endemic, China is likely to wind down some of the restrictions, and even according to the recent estimate by Goldman Sachs, the restrictions are likely to be wound down in the beginning of next year, in the first part of next year, perhaps after the two sessions. But that was before all these protests happened. And as I said, there are worrying signs, political signs of these protests. But the President Xi's government, the Chinese Communist Party, still remains the party most supported by its people, according, for example, to the Harvard Kennedy School study last year and the Elderman Trust study at the beginning of this year. So I think that these are only the signs of frustration expressed by the youngsters. And of course, the frustration is not just because of the pandemic. A lot of the young people tend to be lying flat these days because they see that the economy is loaded against them, controlled by some of the big boys.